I love this story that we just heard from Luke. Jesus shows up behind the locked doors to people who are afraid and basically says it's going to be all right. Everything is going to be all right. Got anything to eat? Because there they were at a meal, it seems, once again. It kind of reminds me of you, Jorge, when you come into staff meeting. You're always saying, what? No snacks? So, Jorge, what are you hungry for?
That's messed up, Rev. Sharing secrets like that about my life on staff meetings. I'm always hungry, though. That is true. I mean, obviously, I crave for Mexican food, but I'm hungry for Korean food, Thai food, Cuban food, Salvadoreñan food. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, is there a particular food you want me to talk about?
No.
What I'm hungry for?
No.
Because I'll be happy to.
I didn't want a list of foods. I want to know, okay, let me try asking another question.
I'm hungry right now.
Can I just say he always goes off script when we're doing a joint sermon?
I think most of us are hungry, actually.
I do too. So let's get to the point, shall we? All right. Really, though, seriously, where do you kind of enter this story, or where do you find yourself besides wanting something to eat in this story?
Well, this story actually affects me on a very personal level. The way I enter the story is, as you know, Rev, I had a rough time in my earlier years of my life, and I remember I did reach a point where I was at a crossroads. I found myself either I was going to be incarcerated or find myself dead on the streets. And I remember being in my room feeling extremely afraid. I felt pretty much locked up in my room because I knew I couldn't leave my home. And I felt hopeless, not knowing what I was going to do with myself. I had no direction in life. But then I encountered Jesus. In that moment when I encountered Jesus, it was this feeling of knowing that everything was going to be all right. I had actually some direction in life. My whole life was transformed at that moment. And out of all places, encountering Jesus in an alleyway was even the last place I would think I would encounter Jesus. So that's how I enter that story. The disciples were clearly afraid. They were hiding. I was afraid. I was hiding. But Jesus shows up. And I believe that from that moment, they knew things were going to be all right.
Somebody say, wow. Yeah.
You must be hungry too now.
Yeah. You're supposed to ask me how I enter the story.
Oh, how do you enter the story,
good.
Ref? Okay.
The disciples are in a new time, and they have to figure out a way forward. So they've had this teacher with them for all these years. They've left everything. They've given up everything. And they're following him, and now he's gone. And they're trying to figure out what to do next. It reminds me of Phyllis Tickle's book called The Emerging Church, and she basically says that every 500 years, the church has a giant rummage sale. Because why? We have to figure out what to keep and what to let go of. What is meaningful for our time and what has kind of lost its meaning, lost its relevance. And yet, what they found, they had to find a new way. What they found sparked a movement. And here we are today.
That's right.
So I really can relate to the disciples thinking, what do we do now? Because things are different. But Jorge, really the deeper question is, I think, and maybe for all of us, what is your soul hungry for? Your deep, deep longings, deep desires?
That's a great question, Rev. Something that I think is going to be an ongoing journey in my life personally. But I know today, my journey, the kind of faith that I am hungry for, what my soul hungers more than ever is a faith that can be affirmed with integrity for the sake of a more humane world. A hunger that always requires a commitment to the integrity of life and human flourishing that is expressed through love, justice, and beauty. That shows an openness to and a solidarity with people of other faiths, as many of us want, or those with none at all, who share my concern for the well-being of humanity and the planet. A faith, a Christianity that is socially and politically transformative, not reactionary. A faith that I'm hungry for, that my soul craves for, will continue, that I hope more and more be post-creedal and post-ecclesiastical. I am hungry to become more of a Christian that identifies first and foremost to be truly human rather than being religious in any narrow sense of that word. That means striving to become more fully human in solidarity with the rest of humankind in the struggle for a more humane, just, and peaceable world that respects human dignity and freedom, as well as the integrity of creation. My soul hungers for a faith that believes that Jesus doesn't only have significance within Christianity, because for me, Jesus wasn't a Christian, he was first and foremost Jewish. Or that you have to be a Christian to follow Jesus. I am hungry for my faith to be one that establishes communities in which the common good and the good of each is achieved. That my faith leads me to be increasingly more an agent of a new humanity, because I believe that is exactly what Jesus was teaching with his disciples, to bring about a new humanity. I'm hungry for the church not to be a closed conglomerate of like-minded individuals, or an institution in which individuals forfeit their personal being. Rather, that the church is meant to be a community always in the process of formation, in which human beings relate to each other beyond the divisions that many of us are aware exist of race, class, culture, gender, sexual orientation, or immigration status, yet in ways that respect difference. I'm hungry for a faith that always provides a model of reconciliation for the broader human community, as well as a basis for solidarity in the struggle for a more just world. This faith I hunger for as a Christian is a community not closed or exclusive in character, but exists for and in solidarity with others. Because one thing I know or I believe is one of the things that the disciples struggled so much with Jesus is that Jesus was challenging them to get rid of their markers, to get rid of the markers that were not only placed on them, but maybe that they placed on others. Because that moment we get rid of our markers, we begin to listen to each other, to hear one another. So that's what I'm hungry for. How about you, Rev?
I'm hungry for a God that somebody else didn't make up, or a God that I didn't make up. I'm hungry for a presence that is real in the everyday messiness and beauty of life. For a deep and sustaining faith that has raised me up above church doctrine, up above people's judgments and fears, and up above my own fears. I'm hungry for a serenity found at the deepest part of my being, that eye in the storm, that calm beneath the raging waters. And I'm hungry for a sense of well-being in an often senseless world. You know, beloved community, my faith and my connection with the divine presence is intimate. It's real. And as I navigate the complexities of my soul's interior landscape, I am very aware that I am not alone. That there is, and always has been, a presence with me in the emptiness and in the ecstasy. My faith is intimate. But I want to make a distinction. My faith is not personal. It is not private. The faith I have embedded in the teachings of Jesus is never personal and never private. It always has social implications. And I'm hungry for a faith that is human enough for our complicated world. I guess like you, Jorge, I hunger for a human Christianity. Is anybody out there with us? Because you've been really quiet while we're talking here. Okay, just checking in.
They're
okay.
really hungry, right?
Okay. And just stay with me for another minute. If Christian means a personal relationship with Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, I don't think I'm any longer a Christian. If Christian means love your neighbor as yourself, then I'm all in. But I fear that the former description has, in general, a distant relationship to the latter. You know, for a long time, I have lived on what Catholic priest Richard Rohr would call the edge of the inside. The edge of the inside. As a woman, and a particularly outspoken woman, as a lesbian, and as a somewhat outspoken lesbian. Big surprise to all of you, I know. I've lived on the edge of the inside of Christianity, distanced from the center. But because of that position, I think sometimes I can see more clearly. I'm not seduced by the lure of tribalism, because I've never really fully belonged anyway. I don't feel the need to cling to my Christian identity because that identity has been questioned over and over again. And my faith has been dragged through the mud. It is not a sanitized faith. And I don't see Jesus as particularly nice, but as someone who loves to stir things up. I hunger to be simply a human first. And after all, isn't that the point of the incarnation?
That's right.
So, I guess I'm a humanist, which means one who is interested with the welfare and interest of humans, a person with strong concern for human welfare, values, and dignity. And I guess I'm secular, which means worldly, because I don't believe in a separation of the sacred and the secular. I believe the only the difference is between the sacred and the profane. That is vastly different. So as a humanist, secular Christian, I hunger for a faith that is good news to the poor, that sees all people as beloved humans, that sees others, whoever they are, with the same dreams, the same passions, the same hunger, and they have those things with the same intensity that I do. The need to belong. I hunger for a faith that is willing to pay the cost, willing to sacrifice and to give. As Annie Lamott says, giving away what we can, our time, our money, our prayers, to the suffering people of the world. And like her, most days, I don't get it right. And so I am always humbled. And from that place, perhaps something new emerges. So maybe we didn't ask one of the most important questions, Jorge. I don't know that we have the answers, but what do you think the world is hungry for people of faith?
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm always constantly asking myself and don't have an answer for. But one thing I do believe is with those disciples in that room at that moment, when they knew they had lost their teacher, but showed up, they were a collective. And I believe and I like to imagine that they knew at that point that they needed one another to find out together what the next thing, the next decision in their lives was going to be. So I believe that that is a question that will require all of us together to figure out. That becomes a quest in our lives as a community to do that kind of work. Because we know that the disciples had a mission and that Jesus had a mission. So the question is, what is our quest that will help us move forward and do the work that I believe we need to do?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have the answer either, but I know this, that we need to flip the paradigm. That instead of always wondering, how do we get people to come here? You know what I'm going to say, right? We get filled up and we are out there. In all our fullness and in all our humanity, and with that deep sense of presence and that we are not alone. And I don't think any of us could go wrong with remembering that the main requirement of us is to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. So, dear friends, what is it that you are hungry for in your faith? And as we journey together, may our conversations be rich and deep, and may our actions be just and right. Amen.
Amen.